All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome here from the Great Pacific Northwest and from the heart of hop country. We have a couple different people on here today, and we're really excited to talk about a month away from harvest and bales rolling in, what we're seeing, what we're thinking about, and how things are looking from a Yakima Chief Hops perspective. So with that, I do want to kick us off, and we have a lot of people on this call today. So I want to go around and make some introductions. I'll just first and foremost, since I'm speaking, if you haven't had a chance to meet me before, I'm Brian Pierce. I'm our Chief Sales and Marketing Officer, normally based here in Yakima. In a normal year, we'd be traveling a little bit more than I have been, but looking forward to a really awesome harvest this year. Since I got a few people with me in the room today, Spencer, I'll turn it over to you to say hi.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Spencer Tokemeyer. I'm the Director of Sales North America, and this will be my fifth harvest year.
Yep. Pete, Pedro Venegas, VP Grower Relations. This will be my 33rd harvest this year.
Awesome. Just a couple.
A couple.
Well, great. And Steve, I see you on my screen here right away. Do you want to give us an introduction as well?
Yeah, thanks for joining us. My name's Steve Carpenter. I'm the Chief Supply Chain Officer for Yakima Chief Hops. And I hate to mention how many hop harvests I've been through. The first one I remember, I was a 5-year-old kid just following my dad around who did the hop drying back then. So I guess this would make my 59th hop harvest coming up that I can remember anyway. Again, thanks for joining us. We look forward to sharing some information with you that might be helpful.
Awesome. And how about you, Dean?
Hi, everyone. My name's Dean Munching. I'm the Vice President of Sales for Europe, based in the UK. This is my fourth harvest with Yakima Chief, but grew up in a hop farming family. So it's a little bit like Steve, not as many harvests yet on my belt, but been around for a few of them as well.
Great, thanks. And Drew, how about you?
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Drew Gaskell. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Yakima Chief Ranches. Excited to be here. This is my 13th harvest.
All
Not
right.
sure I'll ever catch Steve.
I don't know if any of us will.
Probably not.
All right, awesome. And how about you, Joe?
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Joe Catron. I'm the Vice President of Brand Management for Yakima Chief Ranches. I believe this is my 9th harvest. So I'm fully intent on catching Steve. So we'll see what happens.
I believe in you, Joe. If anyone can do it, it's going to be you.
Hey, Joe, all you have to do is go down south of the equator and then start doubling up.
Start racking up 2 a year. I like that plan, Pete.
Yeah.
Yep. Strategic thinking.
Yep, there we go.
Well, nice. Well, thank you guys. Really excited to talk through some of this today because I think, as you can see from all of your different number of harvests, different roles that you fill, whether it's with Yakima Chief Ranches, Yakima Chief Hops, whether it's different parts of the world, I think we all have a lot of different perspectives on what we're seeing in the industry, what we're seeing out in hop fields. So excited to talk through this. And I guess what I want to highlight in that is this is something that we do every week, sometimes multiple times a week, at least once a week. We're always talking about what's going on in the farm side of things. What are we seeing for our brewer customers? And thought today would be a good day for us to put this out there for everyone to see a little bit on how we discuss things. And I think recognize that this is something we talk about 365 days a year. And it's something that never leaves our minds. But with that today, for anyone that's watching, we do have a Q&A feature on this call. So if you look, you can type in questions. We're going to talk through a bunch of different points, but if you have questions along the way, feel free to throw them in there. We'll look for those. We'll try to answer some of those and leave some time at the end. And then there's also a chat function. So it'd be really awesome today, depending on where you're maybe zooming in from, to just throw in the chat where you're watching from today. We'd love to see who's around the world today, or different parts of the United States or Canada or wherever you might be watching from. It's a little early here in the Pacific Northwest to have a beer, but hopefully if you find yourself in a later time zone, you're also cracking a beer right now and watching this. And if you are, we'd love to know what beer you're drinking too. And hopefully it's a really, really hoppy one. So So with that, we kind of wanted to jump into some different topics. Really, the first one is hearing from, Steve, Pete, Drew, Joe, kind of just what you're seeing out in the fields this year. Maybe Steve, I'll let you kind of kick us off on that.
Yeah, certainly we experienced something in June this year that I've never seen in my time in the hop industry. We've seen 100-degree temperatures in June before, but nothing like that short stretch we had of 115 degrees plus. And it came towards the end of June, so the hops were just in the very early stages of bloom. And it's definitely going to adversely affect the crop. However, what we've seen since then is continued growth. We're in the midst of very close to full bloom in many of the varieties. And what we see is, I think, improving conditions, at least today. We have to consider that we've still got a month before we harvest the first hops and 2 months before they're all in the barn. So there's still time for weather events, unforeseen circumstances, that type of thing. But right now we're seeing the bloom come on. We do have, some hops that are in shallow soil, rockier soil that weren't able to uptake the water, that are seeing some damage. Every once in a while, you'll see some photos on social media of that top apical meristematic top tip of the vine that's dried back. But that's the exception. Most of our hops were able to reach the top of the trellis and have a nice vine structure for setting a good crop. The other thing that we see is we've got three, basic growing regions here in the Pacific Northwest. We have Oregon, obviously Idaho, and Washington. In Idaho, it looks like a pretty decent crop down there. There's some tail end water concerns with the irrigation systems and the water supply, but we're really optimistic about the Idaho crop in general. Here in Washington, we seem to have plenty of water to get us through the entire season. However, there is going to be a little bit of heat damage here and there that we'll see. And then down in Oregon, they're dealing with high temperatures, but also the Willamette Valley is in what I would call at least a mild drought situation. And most of our growers have the water situation taken care of. They've got the water rights to take care of their crop, but there are some hop yards that it's going to be nip and tuck whether there's enough water available. So overall, the way I see it, we're going to have some less than a bumper crop because of the heat situation. But at this point in time, it looks like the crop is recovering in most areas, and we'll know for sure here in another month or two what we're seeing in terms of yields.
All right, great. Pete, how about yourself?
Yeah, same as Steve was talking about. That is our big our big scenario within Yakima Chief, having the tri-state. Been around all three states up to now, even driving around quite a bit yesterday, and just having the magnitude of growers that we have, 50 plus growers, it allows us to do, it diversifies us right off the top, and so that we don't have all our eggs in one basket. We're trying to mitigate it to that level, and just make sure that we're able to hit our PO amounts, and then make sure that we bring that crop in. Like Steve said, it looks very, very promising right now from what the early stages of that heat. Yesterday, just driving around, just completely changes a little bit your perspective, and you see a little uptick in what your thought process is, and what the numbers how they might come in. Yeah, so I think we'll monitor it, continue to talk about it. Like we said, we used to call this a supply and demand meeting, and we've been having that supply and demand meeting for 10, 12 years. So it's an evolution, and to have publish one and put it on a webinar, it's pretty cool to do. So we'll see where we go. We might do some more of these in the future and keep, that's the thing for us, to be transparent and just keep it in people's eyes and views, so that if they have questions, we can answer them.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, I think from kind of what I'm hearing from both of you guys, I think I really want to highlight that, the amount of growers, the geographic distribution of hops. And I think, Steve, something you said specifically is, yes, we've seen some heat damage and we've seen some issues with water, but by far it's the exception, not the norm, right? And that's also distributed amongst different regions, different farms. And so, although I think that's what we've seen a lot of, we see images online, or you hear people talking about that in the industry or around the globe. What they're really highlighting is some of those exception points, and not really the whole picture that we're seeing all the time. So, but yeah, great. Good to hear from you guys on that.
Yep.
I think those are all great points there as far as yield goes. Obviously, Steve said it's not going to be a bumper crop. He's seen a lot more harvest than all of us, and has a better idea of what kind of that mean is, that average we're looking for. But it should be mentioned that it doesn't deviate any of our operations when it comes to quality of the crop. There's going to be things outside our control every year, but it really hasn't changed anything we're doing as far as field operations focused on varietal purity, going on and ensuring that the quality of these crops, no matter what the yield is going to be quality. And once it gets in the hands of brewers, going to make big impacts in their beer. So, there's every year there's going to be something different. Smoke last year, this year, extreme heat, next year, Mount St. Helens, who knows? But we'll always deal with those, external elements the best way we can, but really focus our efforts on the things we can control, and that's the quality of the crop. So I'm encouraged by that. The yield is going to be what it is at this point. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. And so really it's just supporting our growers and making sure that we're focused on getting the crop off at the right time, peak ripeness, and getting it processed and in the hands of brewers.
That's a great point, Joe. And I think one of the things that I was concerned about early on is mite pressure. Spider mites is obviously an enemy of the hops. And I'm really pleased that as you drive around and look at the hops this time of the year, it appears that most growers have their mite programs in place. And I don't see that as a large issue for us as we get closer to harvest.
You're correct, Steve. They're just driving around yesterday on the northern part of the valley, talking with some farm managers, and they're done. There's no spraying going on right now. They have it under control. They see no issues. Run into people that I've known for 20 years that's their job, and it's like, you're here during the day. What's going on? It's like, no, we're good. Things look very well right now. So that is a good point to bring up, Steve.
All right, great. And I guess real quick, I want to take a quick pause because we're getting a lot of awesome interaction here on the chat, seeing people from all over the world. So I just wanted to kind of point that out real quick. We got Benny from Belgium here. I got some people here in the States, Catalonia. Let's see, you got Jonas from Sweden, someone from Russia, a couple people from Russia. Wow. Patrizia from Mr. Malt. Hello, thanks for joining us. That's awesome. Haven't seen you in a long time. Hopefully we see you here very soon. So yeah, I just wanted to point out it's pretty cool. We got people from all over the place. Well, cool. Well, with that, just real quick, then I guess I wanted to also kind of hear, Joe, Drew, from your perspective, being on the breeding side of things. Obviously we're talking a lot about yields, a little bit about quality. Joe, I think you make a really good point on that. Is what are you guys seeing from a breeding side of things? New varieties? Anything out there that you want to, I guess, talk about?
Yeah, I think there's, from our perspective, obviously our breeding initiatives are not just focused on the next great aroma variety. Being a family run business, being family farms that we're all growing these crops on, it's inherent. we're obvious that we're going to be focused on sustainability. I mean, these are the lands that we're farming and living on. And so our efforts are always focused on not just the next novel aroma variety, not just the next big alpha crop, but can we develop, craft brands that are disease resistant, that are maybe more drought tolerant, that are maybe more geared to our 3 different regions like Steve talked about. So on our part, on the breeding part, I know Jason is always working on not just, resistance and different, resistance building up through genetics, but also focused on crops that grow better in our climate, that can still thrive with fewer inputs. And so it's very much for us being a farmer-owned company, focusing on farming smarter and reducing inputs, but also not sacrificing quality and consistency. So I know that's, I don't know all the ins and outs of all the genetics and all the kind of different methods that they're using as far as identifying those different resistances in the different brands, but I know that it is a concerted effort on the part of our technical team and breeding operations.
Nice. How about yourself, Drew?
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Joe said and really everybody else, that I mean, a year like this it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And so getting to go out and look at those experimental blocks and see how some of those plants tolerate this type of heat is a great opportunity, as we move forward in some climate change and things like that. To Joe's point about, sustainability, we need to find stuff that can yield well, and we can use, less water and tolerate heat. And it's also a great opportunity for us to test our systems moving forward. I mean, everybody's kind of touched on our diversification of growers and our quality systems in place. And so when you have a year, and you always will, I'm sure Steve could comment on how many different, curveballs he's seen from Mother Nature over his 59 years or whatever he said. It's always going to happen, and it's an opportunity to learn. But I do feel really good about, being a grower-owned company and making sure that we're built for these types of things. It's good that we can be rest assured that brewers are going to get hops, and we also have opportunities to learn through the future. So it's a exciting time right now, in spite of challenges.
Yeah, no, good to hear. I think that's you kind of both touched on I think something that I really want to highlight is, breeding is not just focused on flavor and aroma and how that translates into beer. It's focused on being sustainable on the farm, being able to go through different agronomic challenges. And that's not just something that's happening now, but something that's always happened, right? And you think of things like Atanum and Palisade, Citra, Simcoe, Mosaic, they've all been put through those paces over the years. And as they were bred and brought through the program, and they're robust plants, right? They've been designed for being in these environments. And so it's something that, it's continues today, but also something that, people I think should know that hops aren't just out there hoping to survive through these things. It's been years of getting them to being on a commercial scale. I know I was going to do some Q&A at the end, but we do have I think a relevant one probably to plug in here from Ken in the chat. As Drew and Joe, as you guys kind of touch on this from a breeding side of things, but it's asking how maybe first year plantings or babies, we often refer to them, how they've withstood some of the heat, and how do you think they may come out of this? And maybe if you guys could also touch on babies and how much of an influence that even has on what we're anticipating to bring in this year.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I think the baby crop is probably a little more adversely affected than the older mature crop, mainly because there just isn't that root system. There's not that crown that the older plants have to kind of support water uptake, nutrient uptake. And really part of it is during the really hot time is the the older plants have a chance to develop kind of some self-shading because there's a lot more vegetative matter there. But in general, one of the main reasons that we're planting babies right now with some of our varieties is to get rootstock in the ground that is virus and viroid free, which we think long-term is a more sustainable option because we're able to maintain higher yields at the farm level, and our inputs per unit goes down in terms of our carbon footprint. So it's a good thing that we see babies going in the ground because in a lot of cases they're replacing plants that have developed virus and viroids over time. But in general, I would say this is not going to be a stellar baby crop. Fortunately, we don't rely on a stellar baby crop to hit our yield targets in terms of meeting contracts. But in general, I've been through a few of these. I obviously was around when we had the volcano erupt, not the one behind me, but the one a little behind it back in 1980. That eruption occurred in May, just as the hops were being trained. And my goodness, initially it was disaster. It was going to wipe out the entire hop crop. And then with all that ash on the little hop plants, the rain was going to come and the acidic nature of the volcanic ash were going to burn all. There was just all kinds of things. And I've lived through the powdery mildew situation in the late 1990s. What I've discovered is when these events happen, initially, none of them are as bad as they seem at the time. And I think that's what we're seeing with this excessive heat that we had in June. And then the flip side's also true. You think you got a bumper crop, everything's going right. And initially things are not as good as they might seem because something will happen. So as we go through this, I think our system is really designed to keep supply and demand in as best balance as possible. There's safeguards in the system when we do have weather interruptions to mitigate those risks. And if you've got a hop contract, I wouldn't worry at all. And you sales guys can talk a little bit more about this. At least right now, again, we've still got a week or a month to go before we harvest the first of the crop and 2 months before it's all in the barn. But I think our sales folks can tell you that there's, at this point, if you got a contract, we're going to be able to get you the hops that you need.
All right, great. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so with that, maybe that's a good opportunity to shift gears a little bit. And Dean, I might actually kick it over to you here because we're talking a lot right now about what we're seeing here in the Pacific Northwest, but you maybe want to just comment a little bit from your chair being a little further away from us, and then also maybe it's what Steve I think just brought up is probably a good thing for us to touch on about is what we're seeing on the sales front as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. I would say from growing regions outside of the Pacific Northwest, it's maybe a little bit premature for us to comment too much on it, but Steve and myself and a few other people will be in Germany in August. So watch out for a Instagram live or something of that type coming from the Hallertau in a few weeks' time. So we can give some more detailed updates then. But from international markets, we're absolutely seeing strong demand for hop forward beers and the varieties that Yakima Chief produces. So it's a positive environment. Bars and pubs are starting to open up, or in the UK where I am based, they're completely open. So that's a really positive thing for brewers and for hop growers as well.
Great. Yeah, and I think with some of the things we're talking about right now and kind of just what we're seeing, obviously, we have some time to go as everyone's mentioned here, but Dean, from what you do and working with your team and kind of looking at a lot of global markets and especially Europe, yeah, any recommendations on what brewers should be thinking about from what we're seeing and kind of how to maybe to plan for what's ahead of us here with harvest?
Yeah, I think that really the key point is regular communication with your YCH sales representative or one of our approved distributors. I think the earlier we get information, whether you have an uptick in growth of a certain brand or a decrease, that really helps us a huge amount. But our team are out on the road where it's safe to do so and meet with brewers. So I'd encourage that you be in touch, talk about your problems or opportunities in a transparent way. And that's really at the core of Yakima Chief, of being transparent about the supply chain and what's possible and what's not, and really provide like a consultant type advice on how to approach our contracts and the general supply chain for hops.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and I guess Spencer too. I mean, from your perspective, obviously you have a huge focus on North America. What are your thoughts on some of this?
Yeah, I think it's edifying to to be kind of on this call with people who have seen so many harvest years, and particularly Steve, to hear you talk about the things you've seen before. One of the things I think I'd just like to reiterate that Steve did mention a moment ago is, at this time we do not have any concerns about fulfilling contract demand. So that's something that I'd just like to kind of hammer home for the industry at large right now. Brewers are people who generally want practical takeaways about what should I do, what should I think about in this moment. And right now, for those of you out there that do have a contract in place with Yakima Chief or an approved distributor, we don't have any concerns at this moment about fulfilling that demand. We don't anticipate that there will be a lot of spot volume coming from this harvest based on what we see right now. That's something that brewers have historically relied upon to varying degrees to fulfill their demand. So we don't expect that to be as robust or reliable this year as it might have been in previous crop years. But one other thing I'd really like to reiterate is, for those of you that maybe don't have a buttoned up contract situation at this point, you're not out in the cold. And I'd like to reiterate what Dean said about how regular communication with your, whether it's a direct RSM with YCH or through one of our distributor partners, that's really what's going to allow us to do what we need to do to make sure that you're taken care of. We do still have hops to sell, and we do still have volumes from previous crop years. There's all sorts of solutions we can pursue with you, but we won't know that if you're drowning in silence, so to speak. So we'd rather tackle any sort of issues that you might be seeing head on and figure out what we can do to take care of you. I'm confident that we can. I often say that a regional sales manager wears many hats, apart from selling hops and doing all the things necessary to make sure that your beer is as good as it can be. One of the hats they wear is crop consultant too. So our RSMs take regular stock of this with the team that you're seeing here. And the best way that we can do it, rather than give a blanket recommendation here, is to just dig into your specific situation with your salesperson to look at how your brands are growing and how we can mesh that with what the crop is looking like and what we're seeing. So please just make sure that we have an opportunity to take care of you and an opportunity to fit what we're seeing in the crop to your needs. We're confident that we have the global staff that can do that for you, among the most technically proficient and capable in the industry. So yeah, we're feeling confident at this time, and like I say, we're looking forward to a great harvest season. So.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's from both of you. I think that's the important message. And maybe to jump back to what we talked a little bit about earlier is we're having this discussion all the time.
Yep.
Our systems, and how we've planned for selling and what we plan on from a procurement and working with growers always encompasses the risks that come along with an agricultural product. And the most valuable thing I think we can always have with brewers is having some indication of what your needs are. And our best tool for that is contracts, right? And the more we have that builds a clear picture for how we can manage the risks of the agricultural side of the business as well with growers. And so it's I think to Dean and Spencer, what you're both saying, if you have one now, don't be looking at this as gloom and doom. If this year comes in a little lighter than maybe a robust year, and if you don't have one, it's not too late to still be doing something about it. Like you said, working with our sales teams, working with our distributor partners around the globe, all of them always are very proactive in working with us on their contract needs. And so even if YCH says, well, we don't really have this right now, or we have to look at other solutions, you probably have someone local to you carrying our hops who has planned for some spot volumes and their needs. And so don't look at a year where we're facing some different pressures as something that's going to have a massive impact on your brewery. As long as you're having the conversations with someone, there's always going to be solutions out there.
You know what you just said, Brian, is what we do. We meet, you know, quarterly with our grower, with our allocation team committee, and on top of that, we're just having conversations all along. And one of the biggest keys for us is we'll always get that question: what's our sole position? Growers, like anybody, want to grow a hop that is needed. They want to make sure that it's fulfilling a need, not just grow to grow, but what is it needed, and how can they diversify themselves and make sure that they're meeting their long-term goals to continue that family farm, so that they're growing at a rate that is with the industry, and at any given point they'll adjust. You know, they will adjust to what is needed if we know what that is needed, so that even though it might sound like it's contracting also at the grower level. It needs to be on both sides of it. It needs to be an equilibrium, so that the grower is growing something that the brewer is needing. If the brewer is not communicating back to the RSM or to the supplier or to the partner or partner suppliers, then how can we get that information back to the growers and to our grower solutions team to make sure that we have that supply that we can control? You know, what Mother Nature has given us every year, from last year to this year to future years, some of that we cannot control. But if we have good practices, in place at Yakima Chief. If we can just circle that, continue to work through those and work through it on a yearly basis, and in some of those out years, it'll contribute to a good supply. Because
Yeah. No, well said, Pete.
So Brian, just to add on one thing about communication with our the YCH sales team. Obviously, our mission is to connect our family hop farms with the world's finest brewers. So I'd really encourage, where it is possible, come to the Valley, come and spend time with Joe and Pedro and Steve and visit growers with us. So our doors are always open, and we're very transparent to make that connection at the grower level as well. So that invite's there for all brewers that can make it to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, absolutely, Dean. If you if this conversation makes you wish you could see it for yourself, come see it for yourself. It's all true. The growers are here. They love having people visit. I think that's a really good point. You know, you can hear about it a lot, or you can read about it on social media, or hear it from someone else that you know in the industry, but nothing beats coming here and seeing it firsthand. So. Well, great. If there's any other questions maybe out there from anyone in the audience, now would probably be a good time to throw them in there. I haven't seen any new ones come in, but if there is some, we do have a few minutes, so we'd be happy to answer any other ones. So we'll just give a minute or two for that. But I guess if we're waiting, if someone maybe typing right now, you guys have any final thoughts or words of wisdom for anyone that might be watching today?
One thing that I might mention too is I know that some of these topics are top of mind for brewers. Brewers are very socially conscious folks and environmentally conscious, and some of these issues that we're discussing today, which is how we can be more efficient on the farm side, are very top of mind for a lot of brewers. How they can be more responsible with their own supply chains. That's another thing I feel like your regional sales manager would love to speak with you about. If you actually would like to strategize your beers and recipes and varieties around ways that you can kind of choose more responsible varieties. You know, one of the things that Brian mentioned and Joe and Drew mentioned that we've bred for over the years is hops that require less inputs, less water, less fertilizer, things like that. And those are things that perform higher than a lot of the historical varieties. So those are things we'd love to discuss with you as a brewery, is how we can fit those multiple goals together to produce the best and most sustainable beer possible. I see Levi, who's our one of our people who focuses most pointedly on sustainability, chimed into the chat earlier. It's top of mind for what we do, so I think there's a lot of opportunity there to look through that lens as a brewer as well.
Yeah, Steve, you have any words of wisdom for us with 59 harvests under your belt? I'm sure there's a few nuggets in there.
Yeah, I mean, hop harvest is upon us. It's amazing. Just seems like yesterday we were, finalizing our grower contracts and our plans for sourcing, and here we are, just a month away from the first, or maybe even a little less than that, down in Oregon, because they're about a week ahead of us here in Washington. But harvest will come. It'll be a busy time. We are cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to see more customers this year. I kind of missed that last year, being in the throes of COVID and lockdowns and travel restrictions and all that. So we're looking forward to welcoming a good chunk of our customers back. We'll do that safely, and it's like Dean said, that's really what drives our daily work, is making those connections between our family hop growers that we work with, which includes almost every grower in the Pacific Northwest. And it's our job to make that connection between our brewer customers and for selection. So the other thing I might just say, just again to echo Dean's comment, our entire team that works on the supply chain, from Pete's role in procurement to Drew and Joe's role out at Yakima Chief Ranches with the Footprints program and varietal development, we're all available at any time if any customer has any specific questions about what the crop looks like. I jokingly say every time we'll come out with our crop estimate on October 15th. When we have it in the barn, because you really never know until you get it picked, because it is a lot of times dependent on Mother Nature and what she throws at us. But we wanted to come on air today and just assure everybody that if you got a contract, we're confident at this point we're going to be able to fill it. It is a challenging year because of the heat, especially that early heat. But we look forward to starting harvest here in a few weeks, and really finding out what that translates into in terms of yields and quality. But again, if you have any further questions, don't be afraid to reach out to either your sales staff, or if you want to, I'm sure I'm speaking for Pete and Joe and Drew, we're an email or a phone call away. We'd be happy to let you know what we're seeing out there at any point.
Thanks, Steve. And Steve, I may keep you on the mic here for just a second, because we did get a question, but this is probably can be answered by anyone. I think there's a few ways to answer this. But Max asked, what hops will have the biggest numbers in harvesting at crop 21? I'm thinking on that, you could talk about yields, which we won't really know till we get there. You could talk about acres, which we have in the ground, but again, maybe hard to just say this is the number. So I guess have any thoughts on just, what's a big harvest look like, or a variety that's a standout?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I'll let you know the exact numbers on October 15th. At this point, I'm not sure I understand 100% what the question is, but our number one planted variety now is Citra, and Citra, like other varieties, is going to be adversely affected by the heat. But we still anticipate that will be one of our top varieties as well, both from a acreage and total pounds standpoint. We won't have quite as many as we originally anticipated in the spring when the crop was starting, but there should be plenty of good quality Citra out there for everybody. The heat's going to affect almost every variety, at least bring it down off of its potential yield standpoint. And Citra is a little bit more sensitive than some other varieties in terms of bloom set and yield. Mosaic, that's another one that we see out there with these wild, long sidearms growing. And that's another one that seems to have a little bit more of an extended bloom period than Citra or some of the other varieties. So, and it's just starting into really full bloom right now. So that bloom will be extended here for another couple weeks, and we'll have a pretty good idea of where we're at there. There's a bit of variability in cascades this year. There always is, and we see some really good cascades that were trained early and made it to the top of the trellis before the heat hit. And then we see some challenged cascades out there as well. Simcoe is one of our earlier varieties, and so it gets to that top of that trellis maybe a little bit earlier than other varieties, but doesn't really have that. We call it kind of the pipe brush look, because it really doesn't arm out like other varieties. But there's a bit of variability in Simcoe as well. But overall, I think Simcoe will be fine. And I mean, hopefully that answers the question. Those are usually the 4 varieties we get the most questions about. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. Thanks for that. Well, all right. I don't see any other questions. So I think we could probably wrap this up. I guess if you wanted to watch this again, we will have this out on our YouTube channel. So feel free to go check it out. Maybe you missed a part of it when you're cracking your beer and you missed what someone said because of the noise. You can always go back and watch, or if you want to point someone else to it, this won't be just for live, but you can always watch it again later. So thanks for everyone that joined us today or that will watch us again in the future. Steve, Dean, Drew, Joe, Pete, Spencer, thank you for your time in having this conversation, and I think giving some updates on what you're all seeing. And Dean, I think we'll look forward to you and Steve here very soon in a couple weeks, maybe giving us some updates on what you're seeing as well over in your time in Germany. So I'm
absolutely,
sure
we'll see if we get in Lederhausen or not.
Oh, now you have to.
Okay.
Now you have to.
We'll make sure we have some waiting for Steve as soon as he gets off the airport.
Yeah, that would be something. There would have to be some copious quantities of beer involved with that. I can tell you that.
Well, I hear there's a good amount of beer there as well. So I think we can
Right
make
here.
it happen. Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. Again, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time. And yeah, well, we're looking forward to a really great year ahead here with harvest looming just in the distance. We'll see you all very soon.
Cheers.